It was very interesting to see when I got to the point where Miles Davis was in the band at some point. That was very interesting, and Charlie Parker having some relationship to some of the musicians in passing. And I mean, in music, you pretty much don't get much bigger than Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And to have, when I got to which of the musicians did you get a chance to actually interview before?
I interviewed Melvin Moore, who was his favorite vocalist,
All right.
and was with the
Right.
band for a number of years. And a quick little sidelight, his mother, let's see, was a Melvin Moore's daughter became a jazz singer. Her name is Melba.
Well, let's get the party started.
Yeah.
Loved the book,
Yeah.
Carmen.
I did too.
Absolutely loved it. And I mean, I knew your family was musical, but I didn't know all of this. I mean, you never told me all of this, of all the times we, you know, with our kids and was with each other. And I remember you telling me, it's like, yeah, my brother plays the saxophone. And that was the extent of it. You never said much more than that. And to find out all this information in your book, I mean, it was just wonderful and breathtaking at times, and,
Well, that was
both
my
Kim and I
reason
loved it.
for writing the book, to get his notch on his gun belt of history, so that more people will understand the context and the times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really
Mm-hmm.
happy that you did because it was necessary, I believe, because I didn't know that history at all. And I didn't know if I would be able to get into the book because I didn't think I would know any of those people or be able to relate to that era. And a few names jumped out at me that I knew as I went through the book. And I said, "Oh, Julius Watkins. Yeah." And yeah, a few names jumped out, and it was a thrill. And I related to so many things that you wrote about. And it was wonderful to, to, it was wonderful for me to relive life on the road. And
That was a special time. That life on the road was more than a notion. And you mentioned Julius Watkins. It was my father's fervent wish. If he said it once, he said it dozens of times. Mention as many of the musicians as you can. Mention those that came through my band. And in some instances, he remembered a name, but he didn't remember anything else, where they came from,
Mm-hmm.
or anything. So that was my sleuthing, to try and add a bit of a story to each and every one of the musicians. And I had no idea that it would be in the hundreds
Yeah.
that
oh,
that channel through the Ernie Fields Orchestra.
and you
So
were
I
and
learned a lot too.
you sure
Yeah, I'd
did, and
imagine.
you put in some work. It was evident how much work you devoted to it.
How long did it take I mean, when did the idea to write the book come about, and how long did it take after that idea?
Oh, a long time. My father was alive when I started on the project. So somewhere in the 80s, I would say.
Oh.
And he embraced the idea very enthusiastically, getting his place in history because, mind you, he was a contemporary of Cab Calloway and
Mm-hmm.
Duke and Count, all in that era, and they traded musicians back and forth, but he did not enjoy the same amount of fame that they did because he didn't have as big a literature as them and didn't wasn't in the movies, for example. But he was excited about the idea of a book about him, and he had all of these piles and piles of photographs and clippings, newspaper clippings, and promotional materials. So I said, well, look, we can start on this, but the main thing is to identify as many of the people as you can in these photographs. Write in pencil on the back of the photograph, not in ink because that'll blemish and damage the photograph. Write in pencil. And when I would go home to Tulsa to visit, we would carve out some time to sit and talk. And I would ask him questions, interview him, and we would talk. And then later, he would think of things and would call me. Oh, by the way, this, that, and the other. And I said, look, Dad, this is a telephone. I'm going to bring you a tape recorder. And I want you, when you think of these things, to turn on the tape recorder and talk into the machine.
Mm-hmm.
And to my delight, he followed the instructions, and those tapes, I guess it was maybe about a half dozen of them that were just invaluable in
Mm.
adding further texture to the
Sure.
story. But it took so long, though. It's my regret that he did not live to see the book actually published. But I worked on it in fits and starts. I work on it a while, then I would have a wave of loss of confidence. Oh, you can't write a book. Oh, that's and changing jobs, getting married, having a baby. Life was just kind of getting in the way. So I would pick it up and put it down, pick it up and put it down. And finally, the pandemic gave me
Mm.
reason not to have an excuse that you don't have time. So that's when I put the pedal to the metal and
Wow.
actually wrote and found a publisher
The good
and
old
got the book out.
pandemic, boy, that was a start for a lot of things got going during the pandemic. A lot of things came to a halt, but a lot of projects got started.
Started this podcast during the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
wow. Mm.
Yeah. Like I saw Samantha, not what's her name, Seyfried, the actress, learned to play the lute during the pandemic, and she
Well, it
played it.
was.
She played it on Seth Meyers, I believe, or no,
Oh,
Jimmy
okay.
Fallon's show the other night,
Right.
and she played it like you could not believe. I mean, she was incredible. She played a Joni Mitchell tune.
Wow.
She played the hell out of it, and
There
she
you
Oh
learned to
go.
wow.
play it during the pandemic.
It's good. Some good came out of it, and actually a lot of good came
Hmm.
out of it, like this book, and a
Yeah,
lot of people. You know,
Well,
so
that's my good
yeah.
news story. Yes, about the
Yeah, but you
pandemic.
knitted
Yeah.
it. And I'm sure you had to knit. You had to knit that book together
Hmm.
from the way you tell it. Your father's photos and his tapes and your notes, and I mean you had to cobble it all together, and you
it's so many
did,
different
and
people
it
mentioned.
was incredible. And when I got to the end and I saw the bibliography, like I didn't peek.
Yeah.
I just went from the beginning to the end. And once I got to, let me tell you, oh, I'm getting overexcited. When I started the book, I didn't put it down. I fell asleep over it. And when I woke up in the morning, I finished it. I went
Wow.
straight through on the book. I just
Thank you.
nodded off and went to sleep, sitting up, and woke up in the morning and finished it. And when
Wow.
I got to the end and I discovered the bibliography, I went crazy. I said, "This woman is my kind of woman. She's got it all laid out here." And I was so happy.
Well, that was another thing. I wanted to legitimize my father's legacy. I did not want a story of, kind of once upon a time and I heard and he told me this. I wanted to try and verify and check as much of the information as possible. And I wanted to interview as many of the alums of his organization as possible because when I really got serious in the early 90s, before he had passed away, those musicians were dropping like flies. I mean,
Yeah.
and trying to find out where they were and get in touch with them and see if they were clothed in their right mind or not. And that was more than a notion. And so I was very intentional about the bibliography, the discography also, and to, as my father wished, to include as many names as
Yeah.
possible.
It was very interesting to see when I got to the point where, Miles Davis was in the band at some point. That was very interesting, and Charlie Parker having some relationship to some of the musicians and passing. And I mean, in music, you pretty much don't get much bigger than Charlie Parker and Miles Davis. And to have, when I got to which of the musicians did you get a chance to actually interview before?
I interviewed Melvin Moore, who was his favorite vocalist,
All right.
and was with the
Right.
band for a number of years. And a quick little sidelight, his mother, let's see, was Melvin Moore's daughter became a jazz singer. Her name is
Oh,
Melba Bradford or Melba Joyce.
right.
And then her daughter, Carmen Bradford, is a jazz singer, was with the Count Basie organization in its iteration after he passed, and now is the artist in residence at Michigan State University.
That name
They're
sounds
part of the
familiar.
Well,
Yeah.
Melvin
music.
Moore is
No,
they,
Melba
yeah,
Joy.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Melba
yes.
Joyce.
But
Yeah.
I was
And
just
Carmen
thinking
Bradford,
maybe you
though,
meant that.
she's uh, been around or travels most often with the Count Basie Orchestra. But I
Right.
was able to interview Melvin Moore. Let's see, the trumpet player Jeff Carrington, who was with
Mm-hmm.
the organization in its early days. Oh, geez. You're putting me on the spot. It's another six or eight. Leon Rollerson, of course, my brother Ernie
Right.
Fields Jr. Um, a few more, but not many more. Maybe two or three others whose names I'm not calling at this moment. But it was quite a chase, and to work that in between full-time jobs and parenting, and these were Jeff Carrington was in Detroit, Melvin Moore was in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
Leon Rollinson was still in Tulsa, but Teddy Edwards in Los Angeles.
Wow.
That
Oh,
was
yeah, yeah. I
fun.
was gonna
And he
ask.
was a big part of your brother's experience out there in California.
And Renee Hall, we got a chance to interview him before he died, and he was so integral in my dad's early days as an orchestra leader in the 30s and 40s. And then
Mm-hmm.
he left the organization, went to California, and he was the one who assembled the orchestra that did the recordings in the 50s, the late 50s,
Right.
where he got the hit, the In the Mood hit.
Right.
And that was Renee Hall's fingerprint on that as well.
Right.
So
Right.
they helped me tell the story and verify the stories that were that my father told. And to some extent, you think, oh well, he's just strolling down memory lane, or he might be making some of this up, or he might be exaggerating, or what have you. Those interviews helped me form a context of what really was going on.
And the consistency of everyone's interview,
Mm-hmm.
verified a lot of it. So your brother was how much input did he have in the book?
Well, I wanted to make his story. He was the link between my father's early days and then his days as a musician, and then his career, which was separate and apart. But he was important he learned so much from our father.
Yeah.
So there were two ways that were very helpful. For some of the photographs that we didn't have all of the personnel, he could look at them and recognize and add some names. And this became important because we donated a significant number of the memorabilia to the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. And so it was the music curator that decided to accept the memorabilia. She was impressed that we were able to identify that they weren't pictures of black musicians,
Right.
but that it gave additional credibility and value to identifications. And others will be able to look up names of their family members that they had heard tell were musicians and want to see. And so that was a big benefit of doing that work. And my brother was very instrumental with that. And, telling me things. For example, I didn't know, well, an orchestra, how is that different from, I don't know, a symphony orchestra or whatever? Carmen, it's, 4 saxophones, 3 trombones,
Right.
telling me what the real configuration
Right.
of an orchestra or a jazz band is, because I didn't know things of that nature. So
Right.
he would keep me steeped in the music and the knowledge of the music. And, he remembered the days of traveling as well. And that helped him decide that that was not the life for him, being an orchestra leader. He did not care as much as my father did about having his name front and center or his name up in lights. My brother just wanted to toot his horn.
Right.
So he looked at New York, he looked at Los Angeles, and decided on making Los Angeles his home, and carved out a niche as a studio musician and a music contractor there.
Great success. On both ends. Your brother had extraordinary success. And it's not an easy thing to do, to go out in Los Angeles and, get into the studios and compete with those musicians. So and what's even interesting is that you did not pursue music at all, and it's so entrenched in your family. How did you dodge that?
They tried, okay? They really tried. I had piano lessons from the same teacher that my brother had piano lessons from, flute, violin, bell, lyre, all of it. I mean, either you got it or you don't. What can I say? Nothing took.
Right.
And I think part of it, or at least I joke with my brother, I think part of it was sibling rivalry. I kind of resented being compared or being expected, so much expected of me musically because of him and my father. So I wanted to find something completely different that I could carve out my own niche. And I always enjoyed reading and writing, so that was the path I took.
Mm.
That's all right. I had ballet lessons and I didn't grow up to be a ballerina.
Yeah. Yeah, I had those two, ballet and tap.
Okay.
So that made me a little more well-rounded, but it did not make me a musician or a
Yeah,
ballerina.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we get that,
But
but
it
it's an
sounds
it's
like your mom was pretty exceptional.
She was special, and my father gave her all due credit for
Yeah, it sounds
keeping
like it
things
that you had a
running.
pretty well-rounded family.
Yeah, he would say that she never pressured him to leave the road or to choose something else. She would say, "You had a horn in your mouth when I met you. You'll never hear me say put it down." And that's the way she was. And she had her career as an educator, and ran the house, and um, had her bridge clubs, and and uh, and the church was important in our lives. But and when he came home from the road, our routine was upset because everything centered around him.
mm,
Um, and that's how she was. But he always admired her tolerance
mm,
of the profession that he chose.
Mm.
yeah, yeah, because he was on the road pretty
Hmm.
much
Hmm.
all the time.
Hmm.
I'd imagine, especially in the beginning, So, I mean, how much do you estimate that he was away from the family?
Oh, geez. Now you see him talk about how many concerts, 300 concerts in a year, and
Wow.
I don't know, but he would be out for a month and home for a week and out for 2 weeks and home for 3 weeks and out. It was back and
Constant.
forth like that, and I wasn't keeping count.
Right. Right.
Uh, then one thing that I think is interesting, they made the movie and all was a big deal about the Green Book.
Mm-hmm.
In all of my father's paperwork and things that we found and have gone through, I have never seen the Green Book, never heard of it until they started talking about it more recently. And as far as I can determine, he depended on other musicians who had traveled the different routes that he was going to know who to reach out to for accommodations, overnight accommodations, or service stations, or mechanics, or things along the road. He was also a mason, and I think that network may have helped inform him on uh, guiding around hostile territories
Mm-hmm.
or individuals. But it's he often said it's by the grace of God that he that he made it and did not have as much trouble as some others did. But the Green Book was not a part of that legacy.
Mm.
Mm. Very interesting.
Well, I should have come to Pennsylvania because one of my dear friend's parents were in the Green Book, and
Oh,
they had a
wow.
jazz club and
Wow.
a place to stay
Oh.
where I live.
I can't
Well, I
imagine
wouldn't
him
be
not.
surprised if he
Yeah.
may have stopped there, but
I,
Might
I,
he
have.
heard about it somewhere else other than the
Yeah.
Green Book.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
You
wanted to
know.
ask you because I'm curious how your father uh, I know how hard it must have been to keep a band together, to keep personnel together, and how extraordinary he must have been to be able to do that with such grace and kindness and authority, which was evident in your writing, the authority that he had, and the respect that he commanded and deserved and was awarded. And and but how did he deal with Jim Crow, and how did he deal with it personally, and did he deal with it personally differently than he dealt with it in terms of keeping his band safe?
Well, one of my favorite stories that I mentioned in the book was the bus that they traveled in had two 40-gallon tanks, one on either side.
Yeah.
And he would always keep one tank full. And the other, as it began to get low, he would pull into a service station, usually in the middle of nowhere, and say, he'd like to fill her up, but if we do this, can we use the restroom? And if the attendant said, no, I can't let that happen, he'd say, okay, and he'd drive on till he found a place that if he filled up his tank, he could use the restroom. And him and the 15, 16 musicians that were with him. So that was his one way of maintaining a modicum of dignity and making your dollars count
Yeah.
for something during that time.
Yeah.
But it was difficult. I mean, that was a time, if you smiled too much or didn't smile enough, that could be a life or death decision.
Of course.
But I think in part too, he had a strict way of dealing with the musicians in terms of his expectations of musicianship and on time and conduct. But he was not a Simon Legree, I guess.
No. I know. Yeah, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, he was soft-hearted,
Yeah.
and he was more like a father figure at a time, I think, when lots of people did not have strong father
Yeah.
figures. He often, before he would accept someone to travel with him, he would ask permission of the musician's mother and introduce himself and describe the kind of person he was and the kind of organization that he had, and then get permission from
Wow.
the mother to let them travel with him. But at the same time, I don't think I have that story in the book, but my brother told the story of getting a fine, because you'd get fines for being late to rehearsal or late on the bandstand. And during one of the band meetings, he announced that my brother had a $5 fine for being drunk on the bandstand. And my brother protested, said, I wasn't drunk. When I stood up to take my solo, I stepped in my saxophone case. And Daddy said, well, it's $5 for stepping in your saxophone case. And oftentimes, wives or girlfriends would appeal to my father to send the musicians money to them and not give it to the musician who may have had, I don't know, a alcohol problem or a gambling problem or whatever. And when Daddy would get those calls, he would say, I'm sorry, Mary, but you didn't play saxophone for me last night. He did.
Yeah, really.
So he if they did the work, they would get the money. Now,
There you
what they
go.
did with it, that that was up to them. But he,
Yeah.
is only so much he
Sure,
could do in keeping the organization together and keeping it going.
sure.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And he had quite a few investments that he made near, sort of when he started to wind down, it seems like. Are those investments, are any of them still in the family?
We sold the last of his property. He had a 160-acre farm in outside of Tulsa, where he had a real quote unquote farmer that lived on the property and worked the land. They had some cattle, some pigs, and I don't know, sorted vegetables. And the idea was to raise enough food for both families, the farmers and our family. So every so often they would slaughter, I don't know, a cow. So we always had beef, steaks, ground, all of that, pig portions in our freezer. And my parents put a trailer on the property because it had a couple of fishing ponds, and that was our Martha's Vineyard, where we would go weekends
So
and
you were self-sufficient.
holidays.
You were,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, indeed.
yeah.
Well, because he was raised in a agrarian community and
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle too. So we would go, and that was the place we could pop firecrackers because in the city limits it's against the law. So we'd take our friends and go down to the farm and stay overnight and fish. And my father taught me how to use a rifle, shooting at bullfrogs around the pond. But yeah, that we sold that. I guess about 7 or 8 years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
we had
Okay.
long since sold their rental property that he had. But yeah, he was very intent on, as he said, he did not want to be retired and not have a darn thing, and because so many musicians, famous and not famous, when the music ends, they don't have anything, a pot or a window, as they used to say. So he was very deliberate in that way of keeping that. And our mother supported that. It was the bane of my existence when they would go down to the farm in the station wagon and come back with a station wagon filled with ears of corn, because that meant I had to sit down and we'd be shucking
Shucking
corn,
that corn.
and she canned and froze all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be a country girl, okay?
But in hindsight, you had
Oh,
no trouble eating or
no
anything like that.
trouble eating. No trouble
You know,
eating. Yeah, yeah.
you know, and that's pretty. The ingenuity and the bravery, and for a musician to have such success, and for you to have that land so long, and to just recently sell it. I mean, you talk about getting your money's worth. I'm sure that land, you paid for it 20 times and what you got for it.
Mhm.
So I'm extremely proud of your dad. You
I
know,
am
Thank you.
too.
I
I
you
am
know.
I
too.
loved him to
He's
death.
the
He was
only
a sweetheart.
sensible musician I ever heard of.
That's saying a lot.
you
That's saying
know,
It
a lot.
sure is.
you
And
know.
he was very sensible, if nothing else.
It's extremely impressive. You know, it's
I
extremely
And
feel
impressive.
like I wish, well, I wish I knew him.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I knew him
Well,
Well, and
almost.
in all the years I've known you, now I see where certain personality traits come from, Carmen.
he used to say, if the bus didn't break down so much, we might have something today. It was
Uh,
It was not fun and games on the road, and he was very proud of the fact that at one time the driver that he hired for the bus was also had training as a mechanic, so
Right.
that when they were on the bandstand, he could be changing the oil or
Mm-hmm.
fiddling with
Oh,
whatever
what
needed
was
to
his
be
name?
attended
What
to.
was his name? He liked that
Zach,
guy.
Mr. Zachary, and I'm blanking
His last
on
name.
his first name, but he
Okay.
was the one
Well,
that uh,
he was with him for quite a while.
quite a
Quite a
while
while,
that
yeah.
was a real mechanic. And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
after he left Daddy's band, he went to work for American Airlines in
Oh
Tulsa,
wow.
Oklahoma,
Uh-huh.
as a mechanic. So that's how the
That's how
real
good he
deal
was. Yeah.
he was.
Yeah.
And I was able to connect with his daughter, Claudette Black, who is in Los Angeles, to get some information about him that was
Mm-hmm.
included in the book as
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
well. So there were all these different little linkages.
Well,
You know. Go
oh,
ahead,
I'm
Kim.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kim.
Well, I just, it's through the book, people in your father's band orchestra, that were mentioned, like Big Chief Moore,
Hmm.
and I wrote down uh, uh, Giesel Minerva,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I don't know
Minerva started my brother out on clarinet.
oh,
Mm.
That
really?
story you told me. Yep, yep. And he became a mainstay. I think it was in Duke's organization, was it
Mm.
not?
Okay.
Yeah, Harold
Okay.
Minerva. Yeah,
Y-
Minerva. Yeah, he was with Duke for a
Yeah,
long time. Yeah.
yeah, and he went to Duke's. He worked with Duke and Mercer Ellington, and
Yes.
I made a note on him and Earl Bostic, because I had
Hmm.
heard
Right.
his name. I'd heard that name, Earl Bostic, like all my life, off and on. It had been swirling it around.
Because
But
they say Bird patterned his some of his
Mm-hmm.
technique after Earl
yeah,
Bostic.
but
Yeah, Earl Bostic's a
I
legend.
never
Yeah.
knew about him or thought to look him. Well, you didn't look people up in those days because we didn't have internet.
Thank you.
But I never. But then it was mentioned in your book, and he was
And
mentioned.
he was from Tulsa,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and his dad did not want him to be a musician,
Mm.
and had broken the horn that he had gotten from the school to play. And Bostic's mother came to Ernie Fields crying, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And this, and Daddy had a friendship with the band director at Booker T. Washington High School, and explained to him what had happened, and that he was willing to pay for the horn. The band director said, "Don't worry about it. We'll send it in with when we get the repairs." But that's a long-winded way of saying my father also depended on teachers in the high schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Dallas, to point out promising musicians
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
to him. And sometimes he would take them on the road for a weekend, or if he was in town and needed an extra person, he would look to
Right.
these teachers for that. And Earl Bostic was one such very outstanding young person
Yeah.
that did some training with the Ernie Fields
Yeah.
organization.
Oh,
So I
wow.
made notes of several names, that stood out in reading your book, and to read up on people, and or to listen to people, and to educate myself further about these particular musicians that stood out to me. So your book taught me more,
I'm glad
more
that
than
that was the point.
much more
Yeah,
than I
it
knew. So,
succeeded.
so
Yeah.
that I mean, yeah, that's what we all want when we, do something, and we hope it'll grow and inspire people, and you have.
Your words really warm my heart. Hearing you say that, and that's what it's all that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It
absolutely.
was extremely inspiring. You
Absolutely.
you should put up a website at some point. When the book is, the book has been out for about a year, or
A
has
little
it?
over a year, yeah, almost two
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
So, maybe in about 3 years or something, it'll be time to put up a website of some sort.
Okay.
And you don't want to put too much information on the website. You want people to buy the book,
Yes,
but the
that
website can be a good way to, you know,
titillate some interest, perhaps.
exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
I do websites,
Okay.
so
Okay.
we'll talk at another time about
Let's
that.
let's talk. Yes.
Just trying to advertise.
Okay. Hey, I ain't
Yeah.
mad at you.
Hey, yeah.
I'm the daughter of the original hustler. Now he knew how to promote, self promote. Yes, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just so. Are there any other musicians in the family? I know Carly didn't pursue it, but anybody else? Any cousins? Anyone?
Nothing comes to mind. On my mother's side of the family, one of her sisters, Anna Copeland Dorsey, was a gifted pianist, but she chose to devote her musical skills to church
Hmm.
music. And
Okay.
she was the minister of music in her church in Tulsa, Oklahoma for I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years.
Wow.
Anyway, when she moved to Atlanta to be closer to her daughter, they named the piano at the church after her.
Mm.
But
Wow.
she was very gifted. She could transpose in any key.
Wow.
She could read music as well as play. Just an amazing talent. But in the Fields direct lineage, I cannot think of anyone other than my brother
Hmm.
who actually was outstanding and made a career in the
Right.
music field.
Right. Right. That's I mean, I don't know. He's a hard act to follow, and your brother did pretty
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
How was their relationship as your father started to wind down and very close? Huh?
Very close, very
Mm.
close, and they talked often, got advice. I don't know how much he actually took, but he always consulted with my father different things. And I have this vivid memory. Um, I forget the year, somewhere in the 80s, when they were getting ready to make the Martin Luther King holiday a national holiday.
Hmm.
And there was some, all big to do stuff in D.C. at that time. And my brother was, I don't remember whether he contracted or he was just one of the musicians in this orchestra, but there was a big program at the Kennedy Center. I flew in from Boston. My brother was working. My dad came out from Tulsa, and my brother gave us all tickets, and we were on the front row in the balcony. And my father, if you could see the grin on his face looking down at my brother playing for this auspicious occasion. And at one point, my brother put down his saxophone and picked up a flute. And I thought my father was going to fall over the balcony. He was so tickled to
Mm.
see that. And during that weekend, there were all of these parties and events at the different embassies and all. And I can remember going to one event, and Dick Gregory was there. And Dick Gregory was based here in the Boston area for a
Mm-hmm.
number of years. So I said, and I've been on television, so I'm gonna impress my father. Dad, come over here. I want to introduce you to. And Dick Gregory ran over and grabbed and hugged my daddy. Ernie, it's so good to see you.
Like, out of the way, woman.
Yeah.
So, as it turned out, and I didn't know that at the time, one of his early writers, joke writers, speech writers, was from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who
Mm.
worked with Dick Gregory.
Uh,
So Dick Gregory already, there was no introduction was needed.
Yeah,
yeah,
your
that's
dad.
nice.
He's probably crossed paths with so many people over the years. So many.
Yeah.
Did your brother get a chance to read He passed away about a year ago,
Yes,
was
he
it?
passed. It was 1 year just last week,
Oh,
March
okay.
8th. And yes, he did. And he
Okay.
appreciated. Of course, he would have liked to have seen more of him.
Right.
And but he was as much a cheerleader for helping me. Is it finished? What you need to do now? Do you have this? He was very encouraging.
Well, it sounds
And
like he was a
positive.
good bridge for you
He
between
was.
you and your
Yes,
dad, and
it
yeah,
made all the difference in the
yeah,
world.
and getting and helping to get over the hump, getting it done and everything.
And link the two generations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, and it's so great that you got that stuff in the Smithsonian and got the names in there for future generations to find their families.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it is because a lot of those musicians never got their due.
Never, never. And
And they
yeah,
were great musicians, I assume, playing in your father's band. So this is an opportunity for them to, like him said, get something, you
yeah,
know. So
absolutely.
And that's my fervent wish. Yes.
yeah, no, So how's the book doing? What else? I mean, I know you did a big splash about it when it came out. How's it surviving?
It's doing pretty well. February 5th had a good showing at the Boston Athenaeum.
Oh, that's good.
And the bookseller that was contracted ran out of books, so
Oh
I
wow.
guess it's doing all right. The first printing for University of Oklahoma Press was 1500,
Wow.
and before I was getting ready for an event on Martha's Vineyard, and the gallery that was hosting it had called the distributor and to get books, order books, and said they didn't have any. So I
Mm.
went berserk calling the publisher. Wait a minute, how can they be out? Is our goal to sell more books? I
Right.
mean, that's been my goal
Right.
Yeah.
anyway. So
Oh,
they pulled a few strings and um, up the supply. So I know it sold more than 1,500, which is a standard printing for an academic press. And
Right.
so we've done more than that, and it's just released a couple of weeks ago in a paperback version. Um, and we'll just see what we will see, but have had very good receptions at most of the events that have held. And you don't know when you plan the event and host with people. Sometimes it's standing room only. Other times it's 6 or 7 people that
Mm-hmm.
and there's no rhyme or reason. You do
yeah.
the promotion and you send the emails and you put it on LinkedIn and stuff, and sometimes they come. Like I say, if you build it, they will come, and then
Right.
sometimes they don't.
Right.
Yeah,
So
it's hard to tell.
I've had a real good showing at the Berklee College of Music.
That's
Uh,
good. That's the
yeah,
place to have it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
really appreciated that. And they bought books, and anyone who attended, they gave the books away to the people. So that was very much
That's wonderful.
appreciated.
That's
So
wonderful.
I continue to beat the drum and seek opportunities at libraries and bookstores. I'm negotiating with a bookstore in Rockport for a possible event in the spring. So on we go.
It has, it rings of documentary too. I mean,
Mm,
and I know you have contacts for that, and you have all these pictures, and that's kind of, you can be the voice of it. You have the voice, and it's your voice. But
I think
and
it would make a wonderful movie.
yeah, oh, definitely,
wow,
I
wow.
yeah.
really do. I really do. It's because there hasn't been a movie like that
There
of
hasn't.
that era
Hmm.
and that subject matter
And
and
it could go from that era all the way up to your brother on The Voice.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
what what what
yeah, it would be
what life
incredible.
story, what family story has that type of breath, and all the music in it too. It
All the
would be,
music, yes, all the
yeah,
music.
you
Mm.
know,
It could be incredible.
it really could.
I
It
mean,
really could.
pushing the bus across the state line
Get
to
away from
get the
them.
help or get away from the
Hmm. Hmm. The
horrible
crazy
Yeah,
people.
people. And
Yeah.
yeah. It's got so much life in it. You
Mm.
know.
it's got so many stories and so much possibility. And ooh, it's really
Well, thank you for
exciting.
that endorsement. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'll start trying to figure.
Well,
Well,
I'm doing some
yeah,
radio at your old alma mater, GBH.
What do you, I did not know that.
Yes, I am
we can
doing some
even put
Eric,
you we
some of
can
the
even
jazz
put
stuff
you but
now.
we can even put you in it like shucking corn back at home.
I refuse. Okay, now you've
You
gone
do
too far.
anything,
Brother
do anything.
McCormin, shucking
You've
corn
gone
back at
too
home.
far.
Well, you'll have to play your mom. If there's anyone, you can at least play your mom, and
Mm.
you can get Carly to play you, and then Carly can shuck the horn. I mean the corn.
All right, all
Mm,
right,
mm,
all
mm.
right. I
Oh,
give up.
I don't know about that.
I give up. I give in.
Oh, shoot.
I'll tap
But
But
in.
yeah,
I am trying to figure the next steps. I have my brother did arrangements or copied the arrangements of, I don't know, three or four of my father's recordings, and I want to figure a way to get those in the hands of high school
mm-hmm,
college orchestras
mm-hmm.
to give continued life. So that's kind of where my head is in keeping the music alive while I continue to try and get the story out to as
Mm-hmm.
many places I possibly can.
Hmm. That's a really good idea. Berkeley has a high school big band jazz composition. I mean competition,
Oh, okay.
um,
All right.
and
You make
and
a
I
note
think
of
just
that.
in general, Berkeley is a good resource for trying to get those charts to
Mm-hmm.
to some of these high school um, big
Organizations,
bands.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. So
Okay,
reach out to the contact that you have. I have some contacts at Berkeley too.
okay,
So
okay.
I can talk to you about that later.
Do you know
Um,
Jeff Lockett, Jeffrey Lockett?
yep,
You know his
yep.
daddy was in the organization too.
Oh, really?
Yes, indeed. He's in the
Wow.
roll call, yep.
Wow. I have to
Hmm.
look at that. Wow. That's great. That's great.
And
I
he
Yeah,
mean,
started the Boston Jazz Society. The
yep,
dad did, yep. Hmm.
yep. Wow.
yeah. You two
Interesting.
have got to. get back in contact more.
Yeah, we
We
do
do.
just in general.
We
Just it'd be
do.
good to get the
Yeah,
families back
yeah.
if, I
Well,
mean, that's a
I'm
completely
so
different
glad,
subject.
what you've told Carmen how we found each other, correct?
Well, I didn't. I haven't talked to Carmen in years. It's
Oh,
interesting to be talking to her in this respect because
well,
we used to talk. There wasn't a week where we didn't talk at least 3 times.
uh-huh,
You
oh,
know,
I see.
but no, Kim and I met from my Charlie Parker play.
That's what I assumed, but I
Yeah,
wasn't sure of. Yeah.
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 We both. There's
Trying to
a
figure out
festival in
what
Kansas
year,
City.
though.
I don't remember what year. It was probably early 2000s. And we both were in the Charlie Parker Festival in Kansas City, Charlie
Mhm.
Parker's
Yeah.
hometown.
Mhm.
And I was performing the play, and she came to see the play, and I'll let her tell it from here. But
Oh,
but I enjoy
shall I tell
performing.
my full rendition?
Yeah, you tell your
Okay.
rendition of
Well,
it.
all right. So I heard that, okay, there was going to be a one-man play, Charlie Parker. Okay. And I said, oh, this is going to be awful. It's going to be disgusting. It's going to be horrible. I'm so glad my mother's dead. She doesn't have to see this. Okay, I'll go. I'll go. So I went to see it. And he comes strolling from the back of the place playing, and he hits the stage, and he opens his mouth and he says something fresh to the pretend bartender. And I started laughing from the beginning of the thing. I was so knocked out. I I loved him from the beginning to the end of the thing. He
Wow.
had Bird down. I was so happy.
Wow.
I was so thrilled that finally somebody got Bird and somebody did Bird right.
Wow. Wow.
And,
That's fabulous.
and
Congratulations, Jeff.
we've
Thank
Hey,
been
you.
yes,
friends
Yeah,
ever since.
that's
that's
high cotton, as we
And
say.
I
that
know.
is.
And I was so sad that my
That
mother
is.
was dead
I
because
know what
Oh.
you
she
mean.
didn't
I know
get to
what you
see
mean.
Jeff
Well, it
perform.
felt good to do the play. And to sort of a full circle, there are some people in your book that I found in my research of
Wow.
the play. And one in particular was Roselle Claxton.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
And I
indeed.
and I did this research of the play, Kim, and I was like, who is this Roselle Claxton guy that was in Kansas City? And all I had was the name. And Bird had played with him and was impressed with him. And then to find out that he spent so much time in your dad's band
Mm-hmm.
was just really
Isn't
interesting.
that something? Yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of a full circle for all three of us because that play, just writing that play was just an interesting experience for me, and to perform it in front of you, Kim, was a very interesting experience.
That's the ultimate.
It
Yes,
it was,
indeed.
and for you to like it,
Yes, that
and for us
endorses
to
me and
become
everything.
friends and have this podcast, and then to be doing this podcast with Carmen, who is one of my oldest friends, and from our kids, and then to be reading your book, and it was all of this has been
It was
just
meant to
really,
be.
It was
yeah,
meant to
it's been
It
be.
it's
was
been
meant
really
to
interesting,
be. It was
you
meant
know,
to be.
really, really, really just
Yeah,
there's no words for it, there are no
yeah.
words for it.
Mm.
And I
So
fell
I'm
asleep over your book with my head bowed. I bowed my head to you, and I woke
Oh,
up and I finished your book.
oh,
Yeah, it's really a just it's an extremely it's a bootstrap, put your bootstraps on, and your dad did it what a lot of people, it's the American dream
mm,
type of story,
mhm.
and you just can't be more impressed, and everyone needs to read this book, you know, and